Crockpot. Alright, so this recipe is just going to help save you some time on Thanksgiving Day and help keep you sane. I will link the recipe down below. I did cut this recipe in half. It called for 16 cups of dry breadcrumbs. I'm using just a store-bought bag of seasoned bread chunks. If you want to make it with home-dried bread cubes, go ahead and do that. But this bag is it's just shy of 8 cups. So if you are making the full recipe, like I said, I'll link it down below. Just be aware of how much is in each bag of stuffing. To start off, we are going to saute celery and onion. The recipe calls for 2 cups of chopped onion and 2 cups of chopped celery, but I'm cutting this recipe in half, so I'm just going to eyeball it. And it's okay if you use a little more or a little less, or if you don't really care for celery, I guess you could just leave it out altogether. But the celery and the onion help bring flavor to our stuffing. And of course, you have to saute it in butter. I mean, don't go wrong here. You could use plant butter, that's fine too, but there's flavor here. And today I'm using unsalted butter just so I can control how salty the stuffing is. The stuffing is already seasoned, so I don't want to add too much salt. So I'm going to turn my skillet or my frying pan on over medium heat. And we will just plop the whole stick of butter in there. So as that's melting down, I'm going to start on our celery and onions. If you want really chunky stuffing, you can cut your vegetable into bigger chunks or smaller chunks. I like at least my celery to be in smaller chunks, so I'm gonna dice it pretty finely. And as you get done chopping, just add it right to your pan full of butter. Just be careful not to let the hot butter splash on you. Be sure to give that a stir. And we will move on to our onions. Be sure to give it a stir. We don't want anything to burn. And stirring helps everything cook evenly. So here we have our cup of diced celery and our cup of diced onion with our stick of butter. And we are just going to cook this until the onions start to caramelize, until the onions start to get a nice brown on them. It'll take a few minutes, but the caramelization brings so much flavor. While the onions are cooking, we can put the stuffing mix into a large bowl because we will be adding our butter and onion and celery mixture to your dry stuffing mix or your dry bread cubes. So we'll just use this time to put those in this bowl. Your bread cubes don't have to be this small. They can be bigger if you'd like that. We'll set that aside. Another thing you can add to your stuffing, which I think a lot of people do, is sausage. A nice Italian sausage with maybe some fennel or definitely some sage in there to complement this. But that would give it a really, really hearty aspect to it. Another thing we can do while our onions and celery caramelize away is prepare our crock pot. So I don't know how many of you use crock pots, but mine is enameled and it always seems to be very difficult to get it clean. You can just oil your pan if you want, that's fine, but let me help you. I'm going to be using a crock pot liner. On Thanksgiving, you already have so many things to clean up afterward. Let this one be a quick cleanup. So these are pretty big, and they'll fit oval-shaped crock pots as well. So they're pretty universal. So all you do is fit it into your crock pot and wrap the excess around the edge, and you put it back into your crock pot and you are good to go. So you can see that our onions are starting to brown nicely, and you've still got a nice amount of butter in there to mix in with your stuffing mix or your bread cubes. So this is good for me. So I kept this on just below medium heat. I didn't want my butter spitting and spattering on me while I was stirring, or all over my stove. So let's add this to our stuffing mix or our bread cubes. Just carefully put it all in. Let's give it a stir. Now I am going to add 1.5 cups of turkey stock. If you have homemade turkey stock or homemade chicken stock, go ahead and use that, but store-bought will work in a pinch, and that's what I have today. You can use vegetable broth if you want, if you're going a plant-based route. Vegetable broth works just fine in place of this. So beef, chicken, turkey, vegetable, bone broth is fine too. Whatever you have, whatever your preference, go ahead and use it. So 1.5 cups. There's one. And 1/2. We'll give that a stir. Making a mess. What else is new? So just stir until you get all of your bread cubes or your stuffing mix coated with the stock or broth. And then we're going to add our seasoning. Actually, let's taste test this first because I used seasoned stuffing mix. I'll add a little bit, but I'm not going to add as much as the recipe calls for. I will do a 1/4 teaspoon of poultry seasoning, a 1/2 teaspoon of dry or rubbed sage. If you have fresh, that's fine too. If you have fresh herbs, if you have fresh sage, use 1/2 of what you would have used for dry. So I used 1/2 teaspoon of dry sage. You'd use about a 1/4 teaspoon of fresh chopped sage. Do a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Any salt will do. And a 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper. And you know what? Because I like garlic, we're adding garlic. So I've got some granulated garlic. I'll put a 1/4 teaspoon in my recipe. And give it a mix to get all of those seasonings incorporated. Give it one more taste test. Make sure it tastes good before we actually cook it. And because all of these ingredients have been cooked, it's okay to try it. I could eat that right now if I'm being honest. Okay. And last thing is 1 beaten egg. This just helps all of our stuffing to come together and hold together. That's why we had to give it a taste test first, before we added the egg. I mean, if you eat raw cookie dough, something about it, a raw egg in something that's not cookie dough, seems kind of weird and like you shouldn't do it. I don't know. I don't make the rules. All right. One last stir. All right. Once you have everything well incorporated, we're going to put it into our crock pot. And just plop it in. Try not to spill. That'll be the toughest part. Make sure you get it all out of your bowl too. You don't want to leave any of that flavor in there. Now, you don't have to push it into the crock pot. Don't stuff your stuffing into the crock pot. Also, I understand people call this dressing. To me, it's stuffing whether or not it's stuffed in the turkey or not. Just work with me here. All right. So in it goes. And we are going to turn it on high for 45 minutes. and then in 45 minutes we will turn it down to low. We'll see you back here then. And you can get back to entertaining your guests or working on those other Thanksgiving dishes or do whatever you do. So it has been 45 minutes. So we are going to turn our crock pot down to low. And the recipe says for 4 hours. Depending on how dry or how juicy you would like your stuffing will determine how long your stuffing is cooking in your crock pot. So for me, I'm going to check in 2 hours, especially because I cut the recipe in half. I don't want it to get too dry. Now, it won't be a big problem because the crock pot will trap the moisture in there, but I just want to keep an eye on it so that it's the texture that I want. I'm going to set a timer for 2 hours, and I'll see you guys back here then. Alright, it has been 2 hours. Let's take a look at what our stuffing looks like. Smells awesome. But I want to see what the texture and the moisture level inside looks like. And again, this all comes down to preference. Do you like a juicier stuffing or do you like a stuffing more on the dry side? So let's test it out. I think I'm liking this the way it is. I don't know if I would go 4 hours. Now again, I cut the recipe in half, so that might be why. Well, let's give it a taste test. You know what would be perfect with this? Some gravy. And that recipe is coming. I promise you, it is going to be next week's recipe. But no, this is delicious. And again, it's super versatile. This original recipe called for mushrooms to be sauteed with the onion and celery. But I didn't know how the texture of the mushrooms was going to hold up, and I'm not used to using mushrooms when I make stuffing. So I decided just to leave them out. You can use the store-bought bag of stuffing mix like I did today, or you can buy dried bread cubes if you want, unseasoned ones, I think is how they normally come, or you can make your own dried bread cubes. If you use homemade dried bread cubes, you'll end up using the full seasoning that the recipe recommends. Again, I'll link the original recipe down below in the description, and also I'll put the amount of each ingredient that I used, and you'll be able to see from the recipe what the original amount would have been. And if you are used to having sausage in your stuffing or your dressing, however you call it, sausage is great. Like a nice Italian sausage would be awesome in this recipe. Here you go. This is perfect for Thanksgiving. I love the use of the crock pot because it's basically set it and forget it. And if you forget about it, it's really not a big deal. If it's drier than you thought it would be, just add some more stock to it. And if the stuffing gets done before you're ready to serve dinner, or it's done when you think you're going to be ready to serve dinner, but your turkey's not done as soon as you thought it would be, just put it on warm. I think all crock pots have a warm setting, and that's perfect. Just leave it in there, pop the lid back on, and you'd be good to go. So again, I know this would be awesome with some gravy, so stay tuned for next week's video. We have an awesome gravy recipe coming up. If you liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up. If you want to see the recipes that I've made in the past for the Thanksgiving dinner series, be sure to check out my channel. If you are excited to see the next few recipes that I'm going to be posting for the Thanksgiving dinner series, hit that subscribe button and hit that bell so that you get an alert when I drop the next recipe. Thanks for stopping by today. I hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next time.